Hey everyone, welcome back to In Focus with Ken Clough Photography. I'm Ken Clough, photographer, storyteller, and someone who's always been searching for the meaning behind the moment. And today's episode is a little different. It's about influence, legacy, and the mysterious power of seeing the world through someone else's eyes, especially when that someone never intended to be seen. This episode is titled Seeing Humanity in Shadows and Light, How Vivian Maier Inspired My Photography. If you've listened before, you know I often talk about connection, the emotion behind the image, the story a single frame can hold. But there's one photographer who taught me more about that than almost anyone else, even though I never met her. Her name is Vivian Maier. Discovering Vivian Maier. I first encountered Vivian Maier's photography long before the documentary movie Finding Vivian Maier was ever released. I can't remember the exact moment. Maybe it was an article online, maybe an exhibit catalog or one of those photography sites where someone had posted scans of her rediscovered negatives. But I do remember the feeling. Her images stopped me in my tracks. Black and white, unvarnished, perfectly imperfect slices of real life. Strangers walking, children playing, reflections in windows, and quiet glances that lasted only an instant. She wasn't chasing beauty, she was chasing truth. There was something magnetic about her work. The framing was instinctual, almost journalistic, yet deeply emotional. You could feel the humanity in every frame. And the most incredible part? At the time, I didn't even know who she was. None of us really did. She was a mystery. The woman behind the camera. Vivian Maier was a nanny. She lived much of her life in Chicago, often working for families while quietly photographing everything around her, from city streets to the people who lived on them. She used a Rolleiflex camera, shooting from waist level, which gave her images a subtle perspective, less intrusive, more human. Over the course of her life, she took more than 150,000 photos. But most of them were never printed. She never showed them to anyone. She documented the world, but kept her own story hidden. And I think that's the part that draws me to her work, that quiet intensity. The idea that someone could see the world so deeply, yet remain unseen themselves. When I first saw her photographs, I thought about the kind of honesty we all hope to capture. That rare moment when someone's expression reveals more than words ever could. She had an ability to find those moments not through planning or posing, but through observation. That's something every photographer can learn from. Finding Vivian Maier, Seeing Her Humanity. Years later, as I watched the movie Finding Vivian Maier, I really admired her work, but the film gave me something more. It gave me context. It told the story of how a man named John Marlowe bought a box of undeveloped film at a Chicago auction and discovered this incredible archive. Thousands upon thousands of negatives, forgotten, dusty, but extraordinary. The documentary tried to piece together her life, who she was, what drove her, and why she photographed so obsessively without ever sharing her art. What struck me most wasn't the discovery itself, but the contradictions it revealed. She was private but curious, detached but deeply empathetic, guarded in life but open through her art. Watching that film didn't make me love her work more. It made me understand it more. I began to see how her experiences, her solitude, even her outsider status shaped her vision. It gave me a new appreciation, not only for her photography, but for her courage to see the world and record it without seeking validation. That's a lesson every creative person can hold on to. We often share our work hoping for recognition, for likes, for approval. But Vivian's story reminds us that the act of creation of itself has value, even if no one else sees it. She photographed because she had to, because it was how she connected to the world. Black and white, emotion without distraction. One of the things I've always admired about Vivian Maier's work is her use of black and white. Black and white photography has a certain purity to it. It strips away the distraction of color and forces you to look at form, texture, and emotion. It's honest. It's timeless. When I shoot in black and white, whether it's a portrait, a wedding detail, or even a street scene in downtown Albany, New York, I feel like I'm tapping into that same quiet power. There's something about the way light and shadow play together that creates mood. Black and white makes you feel the photograph instead of seeing it. Vivian had this gift for finding the right balance. Not overexposed, not too perfect, just real. You can see it in the grit of the sidewalk, the wrinkles on a face, in the fleeting light of a winter afternoon. For me, her work is a reminder that sometimes simplicity is the deepest form of storytelling. Photography isn't about what's in the frame. It's about what it makes you feel. And when I think about my own editing process, especially when I convert an image to monochrome, I often ask myself, what does removing color reveal? Because that's what Vivian did again and again. She revealed. Street photography and the art of observation. Vivian Maier's photography was rooted in street photography, that unpredictable, spontaneous art of capturing life as it happens. Street photography demands patience. It demands curiosity. And most of all, it demands empathy. When you're out in public with a camera, you're not just taking pictures of people. You're witnessing their humanity. You're seeing the small, unnoticed gestures that make us all who we are. I've always believed that wedding photography and street photography share something in common. Both are about timing. Both are about awareness. Both are about emotion. When I'm photographing a couple on their wedding day, I'm not just focused on the big moments, the kiss, the first dance, the ceremony. I'm watching for those quiet, unscripted interactions, a nervous laugh, a shared glance, a tear wiped away before anyone else notices. That's where the real emotion lives. Vivian's photographs taught me to slow down and watch for that. One of her most famous self-portraits shows her reflection in a window shop. Camera at her chest, expression unreadable, the world passing behind her. It's haunting, but it's also deeply human. She was both observer and participant, capturing life, yet forever slightly apart from it. That tension between watching and belonging is something that every photographer feels, and learning to live in that space is often part of the craft. Emotional honesty, capturing truth through the lens. Vivian Maier's photographs are honest, sometimes brutally so. She didn't stage moments or seek out perfection. She embraced imperfection. That crooked hat, that cluttered background, the uneven light, and somehow those details made her images more real. In my own work, especially during weddings or portrait sessions, I often think about that. There's a temptation to control everything, the pose, the lighting, or the setting. But sometimes the best photographs happen when you let go. I remember photographing a wedding one year when a sudden summer storm rolled in right after the ceremony. The sky darkened, the wind picked up, and within seconds, everyone was running for cover. My cameras and I were soaked, completely drenched, but I kept shooting. One of the images from that moment, the bride and groom laughing under a single umbrella, hair plastered to their faces, water pouring off the edges, ended up being their favorite. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that's what Vivian Maier's photography reminds me of. The truest images often come from the messiness of real life. Lessons from Vivian: creativity, solitude, and purpose. Vivian's story also holds lessons that go beyond technique. First, she teaches us about the power of solitude. She spent most of her life observing, walking, photographing, and rarely sharing her work. Some people see that as isolation. I see it as commitment. She was deeply present, connected to the world in her own quiet way. As photographers, we sometimes need that same space to walk alone, to observe, to think, and to reconnect with why we create in the first place. Second, Vivian teaches us about purpose without recognition. She didn't need followers or fame to validate her art. She photographed because it was part of her, a daily ritual of seeing. And finally, she teaches us about curiosity, about always looking closer. She found beauty in the ordinary, and that's a reminder that great photography isn't about exotic locations or expensive gear. It's about awareness. It's about being fully alive to the world around you. Technical reflections: composition, light, and storytelling. From a technical standpoint, Vivian Maier's work is a masterclass in composition. She understood balance instinctively, the way the lines guide the eye, the rhythm of repetition, and the interplay of shapes in urban settings. Her framing was deliberate but natural. You can tell she thought about every photograph as a story. For photographers today, especially those of us working digitally, there's something to learn from her patience. She shot film. Every frame mattered. Every click was intentional. That's something I try to bring into my own practice, even with digital cameras. I slow down. I wait for the right moment. When I look through the viewfinder, I try to ask, what story am I telling here? What truth am I trying to capture? It's not about how many photos you take. It's about what they say. Legacy and influence. Vivian Maier never saw herself as an artist. She left behind no statements, no exhibitions, no fame, just boxes of negatives and rolls of undeveloped film. But now, her work hangs in galleries around the world. Her story continues to inspire photographers, artists, and storytellers who see something of themselves in her quiet devotion. Her discovery was almost accidental, yet her influence is anything but. For me, she's a constant reminder that every photograph we take, even the ones we never share, holds value. That our art doesn't have to be loud to be meaningful. That sometimes the truest form of success is creating something that outlives you. Reflection: seeing the world through her eyes. Whenever I look at Vivian's photographs now, I don't just see strangers from another era. I see emotion, humanity, the quiet dignity of people just living their lives. Her work inspires me to keep seeing, to pay attention to the moments between moments. When I'm photographing a wedding or a portrait, I think about her sense of observation, the way she always found beauty in everyday gestures. And I remind myself that photography is, at its core, an act of empathy. It's about seeing people, truly seeing them, not just as subjects, but as stories. Gratitude and final thoughts. Vivian Maier may have never intended for her work to be discovered, but I'm grateful that it was. Because through her photographs, she continues to teach us how to see, not just with our eyes, but with our hearts. She showed us that black and white isn't about the absence of color. It's about the presence of feeling, that every moment, no matter how small, can hold something extraordinary. And sometimes, the greatest art is created quietly, by those who simply love to observe, to document, and to remember. I often think about how her life and work remind me of why I do what I do. Every time I lift my camera, I try to honor that same sense of authenticity, to photograph what is not expected, but what's true. So, whether you're a photographer, a creative, or someone who just loves art that feels real, I encourage you to spend some time with Vivian Maier's work, or watch Finding Vivian Maier if you haven't already. It's not just a documentary, it's a meditation on art, solitude, and purpose. And if you already know her photography, revisit it. Look closer. You'll see something new every time, because that's the magic of her work. It reflects the world back to us in all its imperfect, beautiful humanity. Thanks for joining me on this episode of In Focus with Ken Clough Photography. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to hear more stories about creativity, inspiration, and the people who shape how we see the world, be sure to follow the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. And as always, you can find more of my work and connect with me at kencloughphotography.com. Until next time, keep noticing the light, keep seeking connection, and keep creating images that matter.